Hi, this is Simon Canish, and welcome to Marvelous Videos. The grotesque psychological horror game with elements of body horror is finally here, and as fans of HR Giga, we cannot keep calm. It is a haunting tribute to the horror maestro, and most of the biomechanical horror and creatures in the game are inspired by his artwork. It is a game that feels like an extended nightmare, and we must warn you that this game is not intended for the squeamish. There are parts of the narrative that will make you sick to the stomach, and some parts of the gameplay make Lovecraftian horror look like a fairy tale. So, without further ado, let us take you straight into the twisted depths of the game as we explore the story arc and all the creatures that you will encounter. Now, before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. Does this disturbing game really have a story? Well, the answer to this question is both yes and no. No, because at no point in the game is there any clear explanation of all the bizarre things happening around you. And yes, because you can form your own ideas based on the sequence of events that take place. Confused? Well, let us clear the air by taking you through the gameplay in a detailed manner. The first scene of the game is enough of a hint for what is about to follow. You wake up as a disfigured human who finds himself stuck in an alien wasteland. Everything around you looks to be in ruins and falling apart, and the human seems to have no clue about how he got there. In this strange alien landscape, everything seems to be getting eroded with time, and only certain selective parasitic twisted life forms seem to survive the odds in this region. There is a shadowy structure of a tower at a distance, but the apocalyptic theme is stamped on the gameplay right from the word go. He stumbles around before falling into a deep crevice and ends up in another underground alien structure. If the premise was not strange enough for you, more follows as the man walks into an inner chamber in the alien structure. It looks like a giant chamber being used for some form of artificial reproduction, and there are multiple egg-like shells all around the room. He hatches one of these eggs, which results in the birth of a humanoid creature with twisted mutilations. The arm of this creature can help you open a door that leads you further into the depths of the underground structure. Everything around you seems to be constructed from flesh and bones, and the inner chambers bear the look of Satan's demented factory carved with human remains. However, the journey of the initial protagonist is short-lived. Just as you get going and start solving a few puzzles to unlock some greater features of this cursed sanctum, some form of glue-like substance erupts from one of the structures and knocks the character unconscious. The gameplay then finds you another protagonist, a humanoid figure who is born from one of the eggs. The new guy has to sever his own umbilical cord, and he emerges in a bloodied and bruised form. What's more shocking is the scenes all around him, as hundreds of corpses litter the landscape, presumably one of those who have hatched before. You then head towards the same tower-like structure that you spotted previously, and the landscape seems to be the same as the one you witnessed before. You will be led into the depths of the alien structure, guided by a parasitic creature that looks like a cross between a lizard and a centipede. Suddenly, the creature latches onto your body, and it somewhat fuses with your body. From now on, the game proceeds with you working your way even with the fused creature that changes your body more and more as time passes. You now move into an arena that seems like an alien hive from the space horror movies of the 80s. Alien pods can be used to travel through the chamber, and luckily for you, there is now a weapon with you, which can be used to destroy the hostile creatures that charge at you. We will describe all the creatures later in this video, but let's just say that the creatures make for a shockingly unpleasant sight. With time, you will be introduced to more weapons, such as a grenade launcher and a shotgun-like weapon, whereas the healing pods will come in handy to fix your depleting health. Soon, you will encounter one of the first boss fights, as you have to fight your way through a gigantic creature. The gameplay is more puzzle-based than raw action, but the end goal here is to kill the creature and find your way to the sky rail, much above these underground structures. Once you are there, the parasitic creature seems to have mutated significantly within the protagonist. You will see root-like tentacles emerging from his body, and the barely human appearance of the protagonist continues to be further disfigured as the infusion of the parasitic creature continues. If you did not need your sick bags so far, you probably will need them in the next stage, as this character now moves into a temple-like building through the sky rail. This has to be one of the most disgusting places in the entire gameplay. Statues of women in all stages of pregnancy adorn the walls, and there are other statues that simply signify the act of reproduction. It looks like a giant experimentation with human experimentation, and the possible explanation: an alien race trying to perfect human reproduction artificially under their command. This would probably give them a continuous supply of a submissive workforce, which they would require to stabilize the dynamics of this dying planet. There can be another perspective on this whole thing. The landscape seems to lack resources or any form of fuel, and the human life form could also be manufactured artificially to be used as some sort of fuel. This would also require rapid production, which seems to be the goal behind the entire establishment. The carvings on the walls and the statues hint at the possibility of the aliens trying to grow human and alien embryos using their technology. And the end result seems to be the most grotesque life forms that you can ever imagine. At this point comes one of the major jump scares in the game, as the robotic structures that carry all the embryos suddenly come alive. These are programmed to try and protect the embryos at all costs, and they will engage you until you destroy them all. The character then collects a couple of alien babies and squashes their bodies to juice out a blood-like substance. It is then used in 2 pregnant humanoid creatures, and the process causes some disturbing changes in their bodies with some new appendages. Shockingly, even the pregnant humanoid creature that appears to be male, and there is not a single female creature found in the entire gameplay. Did the extinction of the female species give rise to the demand for artificial reproduction? Quite possibly. Meanwhile, the infusion process of the parasitic creature now reaches a point where the protagonist has such a deformed hand structure that he can no longer unlock new puzzles to move forward. This makes it necessary to manually detach the parasitic growth from him. Body horror redefined. He is severely wounded in the process, but the parasite is finally detached and it crawls into the folds and cave-like structures of the chamber. Can the mutilated and wounded body be healed? Well, as one of the robotic structures approaches, and you hope that it cuts open the stomach and brain of the protagonist and attaches the brain to some form of hive mind. In the chambers, you will watch the horrific sight of several others who've met the same fate. Their brains all fused to power a solitary consciousness. The next stages of the game enable you to play as either one of the 2 humans infused with the alien blood previously. The dystopian alien land seems like a never-ending puzzle as you try to reach a light source at the end of the long passageway decorated with mutilated corpses. The pregnant humanoid creatures carry our previous protagonist towards this light source, but the parasitic creatures appear one more time. It is another gory sight as the creatures consumes the protagonist even as he helplessly hopes for some help from their pregnant humanoid creatures. The latter seems to lack the consciousness required to remedy the situation, and they fuse together to form a mass of flesh. Since the narrative ends just about there, it is safe to assume that you are now forever trapped in this cursed land, ending up so close to what looked like a possible escape route. Is a narrative confusing and metaphorical on purpose? If you consider the overall plot of the game, it becomes abundantly clear that much is left for the interpretation of the player. The developers never really specify the premise or take time to explain what in 7 hells is happening around here. However, some things, they seem acceptable assumptions based on the events of the game. For instance, exploration of the decaying landscape in the course of the game suggests that there is no regular life form in this region. The only things that exist here are a very few surviving eggs and other twisted and mutilated creatures. The world and the creatures bear an uncanny resemblance to H.R. Giger's artwork on biomechanical horror, and it will remind you of certain moments from Ridley Scott's Alien as well. Before we proceed any further, let's make it clear that this atmospheric first-person survival horror game features no dialogue, and everything we are theorizing here is simply based on our own personal assumptions. The environmental storytelling also suggests a strong relation to the mechanism of childbirth. Reproduction and life and death seem to be the key features of this story, and the whole sequence of bizarre and horrible things that happen around you seems to be a reflection of the horrors of the world. In fact, many of the suggestive statuses and the other shapes in the environment suggest that the landscape basically symbolizes the womb. The final escape, the light at the end of the passage, is suggestively shaped like the female genitalia, and it seems like a depiction of a miscarriage in a way that is more twisted than words can explain. From the very beginning, the protagonist tries to break away from its appendages, the umbilical cord, the parasite, and everything else that tries to hold him back. If this indeed is a metaphor for complicated pregnancies gone wrong, there couldn't be a more haunting way of putting it before the player. While we have nothing to confirm our thoughts, a vivid art book with some written descriptions not only somewhat confirms the assumption, but also throws light on some of the creatures that you come across, which brings us to the next segment of our video. Exploring the art book, all the creatures and the lore in this appendage. The very introduction of the art book makes it abundantly clear that it is not possible to separate the technological aspect of the alien world from the biological aspect of it. It establishes the game as one that dares to dive into the horrifying details of what comes from aiming for a world in its final stages. It doesn't shy away from portraying decay, which is just as true as creation, and beyond Giga. The book also acknowledges the artwork of legendary figures like David Cronenberg, Franz Kafka, Sigmund Freud, and many others. Let us waste no more time and get straight to your favourite part of the video, the bit where we break down all the morbid creatures and unexplained entities that appear in this gameplay. The protagonist, the humanoid figure. In the words of the game director, Ludmir Pekla, the idea behind creating the protagonist came from the urge to portray what it really means to have a body in this world, and how the body is related to the world in ways that we cannot even explain completely. This results in a near-human figure, with certain exaggerated elements that added to the morbidity of his existence. The protagonist is a reflection of how we are all trapped in a living, rotting prison, which is our body, and this thought enables the feature where the player can view the full body of the protagonist and its constant decay. It is neither too strong nor is it too weak, or so weak that the emissions would be impossible to accomplish. The overall appearance resembles a skinless man with veins and various unexplained body parts visible, and the deformities keep building up as the parasitic creature starts to take over. The parasite. While Scorn doesn't give you a clear sight of a definite antagonist, the parasite seems to be the closest that we get. The art book suggests that the parasite was once human, but it now has a reptilian structure with parasitic features. It looks lean and sleek, and there have been instances that suggest that the parasite can be astonishingly fast. It attaches itself to the protagonist, and there is nothing much that you can do as a player but watch yourself get slowly transformed into some demented mutation. That being said, the parasite is one of the reasons that you get so far into the game and fail so late. It enables a humanoid figure to grab onto objects, wield weapons, and even solving puzzles in some cases. At the same time, the parasite is continuously eroding away the life force of the protagonist, bringing about a constant change that goes to the point where the next task becomes impossible for him. At this point, which is towards the latter half of the game, the protagonist must forcibly remove the parasite, and it is one of the most gruesome moments in the game. It is like performing a surgical procedure on yourself to remove a certain tumor. The process results in some serious injuries as well. If alien colonization wasn't scaring enough for you today, we can assure that this will be after today. Mold men. A major part of the game is all about absorbing the unreal atmosphere and dealing with real-life portrayal of extinction. The other part is all about the mutilated and deformed creatures that you come across. One of the first ones that you'll encounter in the game are the mold men, who are basically humans created by aliens for resource purposes. They have a vaguely humanoid structure, but the deformities are far too many. The facial features are restricted to the eye sockets, a hole for a nose, and a lipless mouth. The face and the body appear to be skinless, and the hands are unusually long in proportion to the rest of the body. The mold men appear to be pregnant with a womb-like bulge in their abdominal region, and their creation is described with the most graphic details in the art book. It suggests that the mole men got their name from the methods of their creation, which was basically pressing humans into certain molds and letting them dry out. At some point, these become usable for the aliens, and you are bound to feel sorry for these pathetic creatures and their fate. You will solve your first puzzle around hordes of these creatures, but they are not exactly hostile or something that you need to fear. In fact, you can use one of the mole men to open a gate, and you will be experiencing their deafening screams once you are out. Drones, the floating bulbous figures. Some of you might be wondering how this qualifies as a creature, but we've already mentioned that the line between mechanical bodies and biological bodies blurs in the events of the gameplay. The drones can be found in the assembly room, the giant chamber, where you enter. They are also called Fertilizer drones in the book. It is clear that the drones have some sort of organic matter in their structure. They also form large green bubbles. Your task is to release these drones from their stations, and while these do not attack you directly, they are capable of shooting a mist-like substance that makes it difficult to walk around and depletes your health. However, killing off the drones is a piece of cake, and a few shots from the pistol does the job without breaking a sweat. The workers, crater creatures that look like quadrupedal beasts. If it is not evident enough from the name, the crater creatures are actually found underneath the surface, and you start encountering them only after falling through the crevice into the depths of the cursed land. The art book suggests that these creatures are all native to the land, and some sort of crater creatures might actually be responsible for the extinction level threat that seems to have encompassed the land. What has been dubbed as the workers are basically one of the most common and dangerous crater creatures. These four-legged creatures can be the best described as a mutated and deformed form of dogs or bears, and they are basically a vicious blob of flesh that charge you the moment they notice you. The Scorn art book also terms them as bears, and they are not always hostile until they spot the protagonist. Their attacks can be lethal when they come in a large group, and these creatures try to bite or lunge the protagonist, doing some significant damage. These creatures also have red tongue-like appendage, which can be used to attack. They are also capable of firing sharp objects from their chests, and the bears or the workers are one of the major nuisances that you have to encounter in the game. It might be nice and easy to deal with them individually, but watch out when you're greeted by an entire swarm. You will also find larger workers in certain stages of the game, and they are significantly more dangerous than their regular-sized counterparts. These creatures resemble gigantic, deformed bulls, and they charge at the protagonist, aiming to knock him down. You could dodge their attacks if you act at the right time, and these creatures need to be fired upon from the shotgun to do some genuine damage. Even then, you will require 2 well-aimed shots to defeat these larger workers, and their sight is certainly an unwelcome scenario in the gameplay. Floaters. The workers are not only one of the most dangerous creatures that you'll encounter during the game, but they also continue to be just as deadly even after their death. The heads of the dead workers become floaters, and just as their name suggests, these creatures float around like flying heads. The brain of these creatures are exposed, and they almost look like a shapeless jellyfish. The floaters are capable of lunging towards the protagonist, but they almost never cause any significant damage. On the contrary, a single pistol shot destroys them for good, and you can move forward to deal with greater threats. Chicken-like creatures. The art book does not officially refer to these creatures as chickens, but the striking resemblance is definitely hard to miss. Those who have played the game or watched the gameplay will know exactly what we're talking about here, because these are the second most common creatures that you will find in the crater. Unlike the workers, these creatures hardly offer any tricky resistance, and simply being watchful enough can get the better of them. The chicken-like creatures shoot projectiles at the protagonist, and even though they can be quite fast, the player can defeat them quite easily. Cyborg and homunculus. If you're thinking that these are your regular cyborgs from sci-fi flicks, well, think again. The appearance of the cyborgs in Scorn has such a terrifying twist that the player will be left in shock for a brief moment. The cyborg creatures that you come across during the gameplay are basically created from the dead humans. Multiple dead bodies are put back together to create this monstrosity, and they are basically a stack of flesh and metal husks. While they are immobile and inactive by themselves, inserting a homunculus into their cavity makes them extremely dangerous. The homunculus, or the homunculi, are basically one of the rare non-human creatures which are completely artificial. The art book described them as living batteries, which are not threatening for the protagonist as long as he doesn't insert one of these into the husks of the cyborg. Together, they almost have a symbolic relationship, and the powered cyborg is actually the major boss fight that you encounter. The key to dealing with the cyborg is to constantly keep moving to avoid the flurry of projectiles being shot at you, and defeating it is one of the major moments of success that you will taste briefly in this gameplay. The Crater Queen. In most of the crater creatures, they're disgusting. I mean, you certainly don't expect their crater to be any less, do you? The Crater Queen is the beastly monstrosity that birthed all crater creatures, and the art book describes it as a hunched monster with an elongated neck. While the Crater Queen is immobile, the neck can be elongated and move around. Even its face can be adjusted accordingly to its requirements, and killing this creature is one gory mess. You have to slice through its flesh and relieve it from its grotesque existence. As scary as the Scary Queen may look, it is not exactly dangerous because it does not try to harm the protagonist. However, crossing the creature is an important milestone in the game because the player finds a key item that is required to move ahead. The humanoid shell. These creatures are created from humans, and the mortal flesh has been compressed and shaped into this shell-like structure. It looks vaguely like a humanoid entity, but this abomination doesn't have the consciousness that you associate with humans. It can be controlled by another conscious being, and the art book suggests that shells were probably modified by the aliens to be self-sufficient. You briefly control two of them, and they both seem heavily pregnant. But even while controlling them, there is a level of helplessness that you will feel. The worms on the ceilings. You will not find these worms everywhere, but only in certain places of the decaying chambers. They remain attached to the ceilings, but they aren't as harmless as you'd think. The worms can spit acid directly towards the protagonist, and it can be quite a struggle to defeat them. Your aim needs to be impeccable while you shoot these down, and a few clear hits with your pistol should get this job done. It wouldn't be a far stretch to claim that Scorn is one of the most disturbing games we have ever come across. The debate about whether or not it's a decent game can be reserved for another day, but there is simply no denying the hauntingly morbid atmosphere that sucks you in. We strongly recommend that you try your hand at Scorn, especially if you can brave your way through all the morbidity in the narrative. Do let us know in the comments below about your thoughts and theories on the game, and tell us maybe what you would have liked better, and whether it delivered a fresh dose of HR Giga nostalgia, just like it did for us. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe.